What's up, Packer fans? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Pack a Day podcast here on YouTube. My name's Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And today we are going to be talking about some inside linebackers, specifically the Packers inside linebackers, what they're going to be doing at the position, who might be moving on. We already know one that has moved on. So let's jump in and get started right away. No time to waste. And let's start with who the Packers still have on this roster. So let's start with Chris Barnes, of course, undrafted free agent a season ago. I still think this is one of the most interesting things from last season. So if you remember correctly, and I tried to ask Matt LaFleur about this, I didn't word the question perfectly, but they released him prior, at the 53 countdown, prior to the, getting down to the 53 players. They released him and subjected him to waivers. And then brought him back and he started week one. Like, I have no idea how you get to that point. Like, were they so incredibly confident that they could release him, put him on waivers, that nobody would claim him and that they'd get him back? That they were like, literally like, we're going to subject our starting inside linebacker this week to waivers week one because we're that confident nobody's going to claim him? Or did they literally not know they were going to start him, waived him, and then got him back? And then as the week went on, they're like, you know what? We think this guy might be the starter. Like, it's so crazy to me. Now, I think that there's a really good chance that they knew that even if they waived him, that they would get him back. He was not a priority free agent when he went undrafted. Even those who were at camp, it's not like he was making noise every single day, so he wasn't generating a ton of buzz. So I think they probably felt pretty strongly that if they waived him, they could get him back. But it still is crazy to me that if that was the game that they were playing, that they waived their week one starting linebacker, and not just like any week one starting linebacker, obviously one that they felt had some potential and could potentially be a long-term player for them, that they felt so confident that they'd get him back that they subjected him to waivers where any team could have claimed him. Did not. They got away with it, but it still seems crazy that they would go that route. But Chris had a really nice season. And, I think when you look at it, I thought his first couple weeks were good. And then he kind of had a lull, went out with an injury. And then I thought he came back really strong. He ended with a plus 1.5 grade. And for those of you who have followed me for a while, you'll know that, players like Blake Martinez, who a lot of people really liked at that inside linebacker position, I had negative grades on for a while. I'm talking about like -4, -5, grades for the season. Yeah, he made a lot of tackles, but a lot of them were downfield. Didn't always play great in coverage, never made the big plays. With Chris Barnes, you saw some of those flashes. You saw some instincts. You saw him making aggressive plays at or behind the line of scrimmage in the screen game. Was it perfect at all times? Absolutely not. But I think most importantly, when he came back towards the end of the season and he really took that inside linebacker position by the horns, he graded positive in 4 out of the last 5 games for me this last season. So while I'm hesitant to just crown Chris Barnes as the future of the Packers inside linebacker position, I also think that he's the future, at least the immediate future, of the Packers inside linebacker position. And I thought, especially for an undrafted rookie free agent this past year, thought he played really nice. And now there's always that challenge, right, of bringing it to the next level, because we've seen this in the past. I think Quentin Rollins and Demarius Randall, even like a Ladarius Gunter, are like great examples of this. Obviously different position, but where you watch them their rookie year, maybe even their sophomore year, and you're excited about them as prospects, and they come in, they don't make very many mistakes. Even the ones that you do, you're willing to say, you're more willing to write it off and say, well, they're rookies, and that will, it'll get out of them, and they won't be making those mistakes over time. And then year 3 and year 4, rolls around and they're making the same mistakes. And now all of a sudden it's like, they got to get rid of these guys. They're terrible. They're horrible. When really like the difference between their rookie year and year 3 and year 4 was minimal. It's just, they didn't show any signs of, progress. They, maybe regressed a little bit. And all of a sudden they went from like, this is an exciting player, an exciting prospect, to like, get this guy out of town and try somebody else new. So you have to be careful sometimes with these undrafted free agents. And we've seen it before, with guys like Lindsey Pipkins as well, where you kind of get excited about these undrafted guys. And then, all of a sudden they get a full-time position and they're expected to be the starter. And all of a sudden that shine goes off a little bit and you start making a couple mistakes and immediately everyone wants an upgrade. So this is going to be a major season for Chris Barnes, but I really think that he might be up to the task as the future of this inside linebacker position for the Packers. So really one of the players that I think Green Bay needs one of those solid steps in a positive direction from. We know that Green Bay's not going to have a ton of funds in free agency. We know that they're picking at the end of every round in the draft. It's not going to be an offseason where they can go out and acquire a ton of talent to get better. And they're going to have to count on players like a Chris Barnes, like a Kamal Martin, who I'll get to in just a moment, to take a step in the right direction and be a player who can break out and make an impact in a big way. I have a big circle around Chris Barnes as one of those potential players, and Green Bay really needs it to pay off. Let's go then to Kamal Martin. So Kamal Martin, I almost felt the exact opposite about. In training camp, ask anyone. You can ask Aaron Nagler, anyone that was there at training camp. Kamal Martin was making plays every single day. You would hear when they actually got to some of their padded stuff where they could do active tackling, they let some of their rookies do it and some of their less experienced players. There would be like a pop in every one of those sessions, and every single time it was Kamal Martin. And you would consistently see him, pads or no pads, tackling or no tackling, making instinctual plays, getting in the backfield, and looking to play aggressive football. When the lights came on following an injury, which set him back a little bit, when the lights came on, he was still playing aggressive, but he was far too aggressive. And it was almost like he was playing blindfolded at times. Like he didn't know where he was supposed to be, why he was supposed to be there. He was just playing a million miles an hour and hoping that he was going to hit something hard. And to an extent, I like the attitude, right? I can't speak out of one side of my mouth and say, I've graded Blake Martinez poorly for 2 or 3 seasons because I didn't think he was aggressive enough. And then Kamal Martin comes in and plays aggressive. And I'm like, well, I don't like this guy, right? So I love the attitude. I love the passion. I love the intensity, but you've got to tone it down. In fact, if you could figure out a way to take Blake Martinez and Kamal Martin and combine them into one player, Kamal's physicality and his aggressiveness and his attacking demeanor with Blake Martinez's, just overall smarts of the position with sound tackling and knowing where he's supposed to be, you'd end up with a hell of an inside linebacker. Unfortunately, they're two different players at two very opposite ends of the spectrum. And Green Bay always needed Blake Martinez to get a little bit more aggressive. Now they're going to need Kamal Martin to tone it down a little bit and know where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there, why he's supposed to be there. The terminology that you hear all the time is that you could tell they were thinking out there. You could tell Kamal Martin was thinking, but there were times you weren't sure he was thinking enough. And I'm not saying he's not bright enough or smart enough to play the position at all. That's not my commentary here. It's just he was playing so fast, I don't know that he ever took the time to slow down to think, is this what I should actually be doing on the play? And overall, I came away not very impressed with Kamal Martin's rookie season. But I like the athleticism. I like the demeanor now with a full offseason, with a full training camp, rookie mini camps, OTAs, hopefully, fingers crossed. Can he take a step in the right direction of just knowing the defense? Now he's going to have a new defense and he's going to have some new things to learn, but I'm excited to see where his progression takes him this upcoming season. I do think this is a really big offseason because I talked about before those players who maybe would take a step back as rookies. You also have your players like an Oren Burks or a Josh Jackson. If it didn't click in year 1 and now it doesn't click in year 2, it seems like it never ever clicks, right? You really want to see that spark at some point in those first couple seasons to say like, okay, they're getting it. They're heading in the right direction. I'm not saying he needs to be a Pro Bowler this year, but you'd like to see him take that step in the right direction. One of those players who I mentioned has not done that has been Oren Burks, 3rd round pick, who has been a massive disappointment. He's been okay on special teams from time to time, but it's not like anyone's filling out their Pro Bowl ballots with Oren Burks as a special teamer. He's fine. But on defense, he's been an unmitigated disaster. And the thought process with him coming out of college was that he played safety and linebacker and edge rusher. And maybe he would have the blitzing skills of that edge rusher that he played in college. And he'd have the overall, wherewithal and just positional versatility of that linebacker. But he'd have the coverage of the times that he played safety. Unfortunately, he's had none of it. I don't even know that you can say it's a jack of all trades, but master of none. He hasn't showed that he can do any of it at a high level whatsoever. He's been picked on in coverage. He has not been sound in his gap responsibilities. I just don't think that Oren Burks has shown that he can play defense at an NFL level, and he's making way too much money and just doesn't have the upside to just keep around as a special teams player. Long story short, unless he takes a massive jump, I would be very surprised if Oren Burks is on the roster come 53-man roster cutdowns, later this season, if it doesn't even happen before then. I talked about Josh Jackson the other day as a potential change of scenery guy. Oren Burks, you could say in the same vein. I'm not sure anyone's, pining to trade for an Oren Burks, but maybe you can, again, take a third or fourth round pick from another team who hasn't panned out, make that trade, get a change of scenery and see what happens. I just don't see a future for Oren Burks in Green Bay. And then Ty Summers. I do think Ty Summers has some ability as a special teams player and as a backup linebacker. He actually got some serious snaps down the stretch in the playoffs, and I thought he played well. There were some injuries for the Packers, and I actually thought he played pretty well given those opportunities. I don't think he's ever going to be a full-time starting linebacker in this league, but I still think he has some talent to be, a number 4 linebacker who can provide some depth, be okay in coverage, be okay as a tackler, and also help out on special teams. I would expect him to be back in a depth role for the Packers this season. That leaves Dejon Harris and Ray Wilborn as players they signed to future contracts. James Burgess as a unrestricted free agent. I do not expect him to be back. Of course, they already released Christian Kirksey, so barring something crazy where he comes back on a minimum deal or something after releasing him, which I don't see happening, Christian Kirksey will be not back this season. And then you have to look at that hybrid linebacker safety position. I already talked about Raven Green pretty heavily in my safety breakdown, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure to do so. But Raven Green's a big part of that hybrid linebacker position, and they've got a major decision to make with him as a restricted free agent. I think he ends up back in some capacity. I really do, but I think they may try to get him back less than what that restricted free agent tender is at, maybe at like $1.5 million instead of $2+ million as a right of first refusal. And then if not, you also have to look at the potential of a Vernon Scott maybe starting to play that position. So you have some question marks here, right? Chris Barnes, Kamal Martin, Ty Summers, unproven. Maybe you get Raven Green back, but maybe not. Vernon Scott, certainly unproven as well. I don't expect Oren Burks to be back. James Burgess is not going to be back. We know Christian Kirksey's not going to be back. Certainly some spaces to fill. So I don't think that Green Bay is going to go nuts in free agency at inside linebacker. Now, it's interesting. I talked to Aaron Nagler about this earlier this week on Let's Talk Football. On the one hand, if you're Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, the teams that you struggled against this year were teams that had Levante David and Devin White and Eric Hendricks for the Vikings. Darius Leonard was a menace. We've seen all these really good inside linebackers that have given Green Bay trouble these past couple of seasons. Those are the teams that Green Bay have struggled with. You'd have to think that at some point you say, you know what? Those are the teams that have had some good success against us. Maybe it's time for us to go and get one of those inside linebackers. But we've seen this team not value the inside linebacker position early in the draft. They'd rather value edge rusher, defensive tackle, cornerback, maybe even safety. And I'm not necessarily sure that that's the wrong way to go, but it does seem like it's time to get some more athleticism at the position. Now come in Joe Barry, who, if you look at that Rams defense the last couple seasons, they haven't spent a ton of capital on the inside linebacker position either. So I don't foresee Green Bay either going nuts early in the draft or in free agency to address this position. But I do think they're going to either need to take, maybe another third, fourth round pick, maybe a flyer free agent, maybe a guy like Dylan Cole from Houston who tore his ACL in 2019, came back last year in 2020, wasn't his same self, but usually it takes a year and then you get back. That could be a free agent flyer. He was a athletic freak coming out of college, really started to show as a special teams player and, kind of a sub-package linebacker. He could be a player that I could see Green Bay going after as a cheap free agent alternative to a guy like a Christian Kirksey. So Green Bay is going to have to do some tweaking at this position. I don't think they're settled in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think you can just say, you know what, Kamal Martin, Chris Barnes, Ty Summers, and, that's going to be mostly it. I would like to see them address this position and get faster and get more physical. Will they? I don't know. Raven Green's another big decision that they have to make. It'll be interesting to see if they bring him back. Maybe they have some confidence in Vernon Scott. It's tough to say. But if you really want this defense to take a step in the right direction, they need this inside linebacker spot to be better. And maybe that's just Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin playing better. And that's possible, and that'd be great. But I think they need to hedge their bets a little bit and maybe give themselves another couple swings and see if maybe they can't get a little bit more talent in the door at inside linebacker. Thanks so much for checking out this episode today. I appreciate you greatly. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and check out Dusty, Steve, and Sarah on today's audio version of the podcast. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.